Chapter 20. Aloha, brothers. In September 2005, the ATF paid my way to Hawaii for the annual Labor Day run to Kona on the Big Island of Hawaii. It was supposed to be a working vacation on the government tit, traveling to make a gun buy from a member of the Vagos chapter in Puna. But after buying weapons from a patch named Woodstock, I ate bad shellfish and spent the next 5 days with my ass and head in the toilet. If I was going to be sick and flat on my back for a week, though at least the room was nice. The 4-star hotel looked over the beach while the rest of the Green Nation were slumming it up in cheap seats farther inland, forced to endure the clatter of tired air conditioners. Only one other Vago shared my luxurious accommodations on the Kona coastline, some big old goober looking dude I spotted kicking around the parking lot. I thought it was curious that we were the only two greenies in that particular hotel, but I didn't bother thinking it through. I was more concerned with running out of toilet paper. Problems had followed Green Nation across the ocean. The Puna, Hawaii Vagos were having issues with another motorcycle club on the island called the Kinsmen. You would have thought, with soft candy and beaches and tropical breezes, those Hawaii boys would have been a mellower brand of outlaw. But no, they were making plans to remove the Kinsmen's patches by force. What seemed to bother the Vagos the most was the 81 patch the Kinsmen wore on their cuts. The 8th letter in the alphabet is H, and A is the first. That would be the Hells Angels. It was always about those fucking angels. Not sure why there was so much contempt for the mighty red and white. Could be the Vagos saw them as a bunch of prima donnas who walked around thinking their shit didn't stink. Or it might have been a chronic case of angel envy. There are a ton of 1%ers out there who get a stiffy at the mere thought of an angel's death's head on their back. Big Todd, for one, had himself a huge man crush on that outlaw club. Whatever the reason, because the Kinsmen were advertising support for Green Nation's arch enemies, Tramp had given those Puna boys the green light to rip the patch off any Kinsman that crossed their path. I got that same order direct from the big kahuna himself, who told me I could keep the patches as battle trophies. But taking scalps was the furthest thing from my mind as I lay room-bound with my stomach cramping and nasty shit blasting from every orifice. John Carr had come knocking, and he brought company. Standing with him on the second-floor walkway was ATF Special Agent Kozlowski and that big old goober-looking Vago from the parking lot. Fuck. No way, man. No fucking way, I cursed at John. This ain't happening. Just listen to me, he said, extending his hand to stop Kaz from following him into the room. I don't fucking appreciate what you're doing, man. You know how I felt about this. George, I'm sorry, but this had to happen. You and Charles have seen each other around the hotel. Kaz and I thought it'd be best to have you two meet instead of looking at each other sideways the whole time you're here. That smelled like bullshit. I sat on the bed and slow cooked. You know, I would never jeopardize your safety. I wouldn't do that to you, John insisted before gesturing toward the door. I'm telling you, Charles is a good guy. I looked past him at the CI from Victorville. Quick Draw didn't seem particularly thrilled to see me either. I knew right away that this was one of those arranged marriages, and already it wasn't working. Have I ever steered you wrong, dude? Asked John. Not until now, I told him. It took me a while to warm up to Charles. Like I said, I didn't trust dopers, reformed or otherwise. We finally ended up having a long phone conversation the day before I headed back to the States. I'd been undercover a year longer than him, but a lot had happened up there in the high desert. Those boys were crazy, and Psycho, the Victorville P, let his inmates run wild. Charles had stories to tell. We talked about Twist, Foreman, the asshole who'd shot little Jimmy in the back during that home invasion in Lucerne Valley, and how Charles was moving significant quantities of marijuana for Psycho. Just before coming to Hawaii, in fact, he bought 50 pounds of it on the P's dime. By the time we were done talking, I decided I actually liked that CI. And I have to admit, it felt pretty good having someone in similar shoes, sharing an experience only a handful of people will ever know. But I still didn't trust him. The next day, I was at the airport and my perfectly miserable Hawaii vacation ended as it begun. As I stood in line with other Vagos waiting to fly off the island, I met a businessman who wanted to get home worse than I did. So I told the gate attendant I was willing to switch to the next flight. She took one look at my paperwork, then said something that nearly buckled my knees. "I'm sorry, sir, I can't help you. This ticket was bought at a government rate." "Holy shit. Let me see that," said a Vago's national officer behind me. I handed him the ticket and pulled the starter cord on my brain. "Where'd you get this?" he wanted to know, trying to figure out what he was looking at. Hard to believe, but the first thing that popped out of my mouth was, "ATF bought it for me." I don't know where the fuck that came from. I just blurted it out. But I have to tell you, man, that comeback saved my ass. All those Vagos started laughing, which bought me just enough time to scramble out of that mess. Got an uncle in the military who gets a discount for me. Couldn't fly without it. Thank God those brutes weren't rocket scientists. Still chuckling, the Vago handed back the ticket and I got on the plane and settled into my government discounted seat as fast as I could. I'm not sure if it was the remnants of shellfish poisoning or that near fiasco at the gate, but my guts were on spin cycle. I checked the seat pocket in front of me for a barf bag, just in case. When I returned from Hawaii, I learned Buckshot was near the end of his road, dying of cancer. This wasn't a surprise. For months, the poor bastard had looked like death warmed over. But as he was exiting Green Nation, that old Vago left me a parting gift, recommending that I replace him as the Hemis chapter secretary treasurer. With my business experience, it was a good fit, especially for the ATF. Now I had access to the chapter's books that made Special Agent Carr a happy handler. Before he dropped out of the club, Buckshot warned that Big Roy's hand would be in the strong box on a regular basis and that he'd never pay back a dime of what he had borrowed. The chapter's books would get wiped clean 3 times while I was a treasurer. Each time the bank was empty, Roy would badger members to get their dues paid up. For a patch holder, that added up to $80 a month. With 20 members in the chapter, as much as $1,600 was going into the strong box every 30 days. Far as I could tell, Big Roy built his new custom chopper without a word of thanks to the schmucks who paid for his parts. And you know what? That was cool with me. I wasn't saying nothing to no one. Who was I but a lowly treasurer, and he the mighty P? On the flip side of the hyphen, I was also the chapter secretary. Go figure. Me, the guy who couldn't read or write in high school, was now a secretary. Once a month, every Vago secretary, maybe 20 to 30 guys, would gather in a Fontana restaurant to hear Tata hand down the latest commandments from God of the high desert. Charles was Victorville's secretary-treasurer at the time. So we'd sit together at those boring-ass meetings, just a couple of federal informants kicking back and recording whatever leadership decreed, including where the runs were headed and any snitch alerts. As Tata was droning on, Charles gave me a kick under the table and leaned closer. "Did you hear that?" he said under his breath. "No, what?" "We're looking for an informant with the initials JR. I sat up straight and was mentally sorting through the possibilities when I suddenly realized they got the first initial wrong. I believed it then, and I still believe it now. Those 2 letters were close enough to GR to shrivel my spinster to the size of a BB, and how anyone could get that close, I haven't a fucking clue. So now I'm swallowing hard, and Charles is nervous because, since returning from Hawaii, he's been seen hanging around a lot with this guy, GR. I called Big Roy on the ride back to Hemet and shared the initials with him, which he relayed to the membership at our next Wednesday night social. Right away, Slinger said, "I knew it wasn't anyone in this chapter." He had plenty of patches of green until Roy threw a wet blanket. "Tramp still thinks there's a cop or an informant in this chapter, so let's not congratulate ourselves just yet," he told the boys. "He wants all of you to submit new paperwork and photographs for background checks. We'll be taking pictures after church. It's all going back to National. Everyone's being reinvestigated." I couldn't count the number of fucks I heard. I added one of my own. And one more thing, Roy cut in. "We need someone to videotape when we make the run to Warmer Springs. Tramps looking to identify anyone who doesn't fit in. Anybody have a camera and want to volunteer? I raise my hand immediately. Warmer Springs in San Diego County is an area of scrub pine and chaparral tucked between Mount Palomar and the West End and the Borrego Desert State Park